and welcome to CYC News for the 22nd of March 2020 and the 13th of Bottomhot to 17:36 am. I'm Andre Botros. In today's headlines, Australian leader warns coronavirus outbreak is a once-in-a-100-year crisis. The Europe shuts its borders to slow coronavirus crisis. Amid coronavirus fears, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu sees an opportunity. Boris Johnson steps up UK's coronavirus response after criticism. World Health Organization and CDC never discussed providing international test kits to the US. UEFA delays Euro 2020 until 2021 amid coronavirus pandemic. But first, staying here in Australia, where Prime Minister Scott Morrison has warned people to stop hoarding as shoppers across the country empty supermarket shelves amid rising alarm over the rapid spread of the novel coronavirus, which has infected over 180,000 people worldwide. Videos show people swarming grocery stores and fighting over essentials such as toilet paper. Speaking at a news conference on Wednesday, Morrison bluntly told Australians to stop hoarding essential food. He said, "Stop it, it is not sensible, it is not helpful, and I've got to say it's been one of the most disappointing things I've seen in Australian behaviour in response to this crisis. This is not who we are as people. This is a once-in-a-100-year type event. We haven't seen this sort of thing in Australia since the end of the First World War. But together we are of course up to this challenge." Morrison, who has faced some criticism from doctors for not imposing stricter social isolation measures, also announced extended restrictions on mass gatherings to all indoor events with more than 100 people. As of Wednesday, there were more than 450 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in Australia. The virus is still spreading rapidly around the world, with more than 7,400 people killed, according to the World Health Organization. For more on the global impacts of the coronavirus, we head to Europe, where the European Union has agreed and temporarily closed external borders to all non-essential travel from third nations. With immediate effect, the only things permitted to cross into the bloc will be goods, medical equipment, and in some cases, people deemed necessary to be the European Union's efforts to manage coronavirus spread. The measures will remain in place for 30 days and will not apply to the UK, which despite having left the United European Union earlier this year, is still in transition period with the bloc. The agreement is not legally binding and will not rely on leaders sticking to the commitments made in emergency conference call last Tuesday. Shortly after the agreement was reached, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said it was up to them now to implement. They said that this would immediately do that. The move comes after the European outbreak of the virus created political tensions among member states. Brussels hopes that by closing the external borders, national governments will be willing to reopen internal borders that some of the European Union member states, including France, Spain, and Denmark, had closed in response to the crisis. Earlier, Germany, the European Union's wealthiest and arguably most powerful member state, announced the closure of several of its borders. The EU's logic is that the reopening of internal borders will make a coordinated response to the coronavirus easier. Over to Israel now, as the spread of coronavirus affects virtually every aspect of daily life. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has become a staple of prime-time television. Most evenings he can be found on 8 p.m. news broadcasts issuing new instructions and trying to reassure the country of 8.7 million people that everything will be fine. Netanyahu has called for a national emergency government consisting of all parties in the Knesset, except the Arab parties, to deal with the impact of coronavirus. In a statement, he said, "In light of the world and national crisis, we have to unite our strength and form strong and stable government that can pass a budget and take tough decisions." Netanyahu suffered a significant political setback on Sunday evening when the country's president announced that Netanyahu's main opponent, blue and white leader Benny Gantz, and received enough support from lawmakers to get first crack at forming the new government. But Netanyahu continues to insist it is he and not his inexperienced rival who should be leading the country through the crisis. As long as the serving prime minister in Israel's history, Netanyahu has guided the country through several wars, deals of dozen world leaders, and largely the face of Israel. Moving over to the United Kingdom now, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson drastically ramped up country's response to coronavirus on Monday, after a weekend of confusing briefings. The policy shift comes after Johnson's response to the crisis came under very public criticism and sparked suggestions that he is not taking anywhere near seriously enough. Only last week, Johnson asked those with coronavirus symptoms to self-isolate for 7 days. Last Monday, he said the entire household where someone was displaying signs of illness, a fever, or a new persistent cough should now stay put for 14 days. Encouraging people to avoid pubs, clubs, theatres and restaurants, he said now it is time for everyone to stop non-essential contact with others and stop all unnecessary travel, with a particular focus on the elderly, pregnant women and those with pre-existing health conditions. It is advised that people who are considered medically vulnerable be shielded from other members of the public for 12 weeks. It is also announced that emergency services will no longer be present at large gatherings such as sporting events and music concerts. To some health news now, as the United States struggled to launch testing for the novel coronavirus using kits developed by the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The World Health Organization shipped hundreds of thousands of tests to countries across the world. WHO spokesman Tariq Jarasovic said the discussions occurred between the organization and the CDC about providing tests to the United States, and they did not offer coronavirus tests to the CDC. It is understood that the United States does not ordinarily rely on WHO for tests because the US typically has a capacity to manufacture its own diagnostics. On January 17, the WHO published the protocol from German researchers with the instructions necessary for any country to manufacture coronavirus tests. That same day, a top US health official said that the CDC has developed an early version of its own test, not relying on any protocols published by the WHO. As the WHO shipped hundreds of thousands of tests, border US testing struggled to begin. Days after CDC's tests had shipped, some labs reported that the test kits were not working as expected, which eventually required tests to be remanufactured. As of March 9th, public health labs in all 50 states of Washington, D.C. are able to test for the novel coronavirus. And in sport, UEFA has decided to postpone this year's European Championship League until 2021 because of the ongoing coronavirus outbreak. The football tournament has been due to kick off in Rome, Italy on June 12 and was to be played in 12 different host cities across the continent. At emergency meetings last week, European football's governing body ruled the competition will now be played between June 11 and July 12 next year, allowing time for domestic competitions to conclude. The majority of Europe's top football leagues have been suspended because of the virus, and Italy, France and Spain have all introduced lockdown restrictions to millions of citizens as they try to avoid COVID-19's impact. UEFA's president Alexander Ceferin said, "We are all at the helm of sport. Vast numbers of people and breathe that have been laid low by the invisible, fast-moving opponent. It is at times like these that all football community needs to show responsibility, unity, solidarity and altruism." UEFA has yet to reach decisions on what happens to this season's European club competitions, which have been put on hold. However, it is committed to completing all domestic European club competitions by the end of the current sporting season. June 30 should have the situation start to improve. As a result, domestic league games could be played during midweek and the UEFA club competitions may be scheduled for the weekend. UEFA would also look to adapt next season's Champions League and European League qualifying rounds if the current competitions are delayed. And that is all for CYC News today. A reminder you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Andrew Botros from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night and God bless you.